All right, here's your homework for graphing secant, cosecant, and cotangent. So let's get started. Secant, so just the period for now, it would be 2 pi, but inside we're multiplying, so we're going to divide to undo it, so the 1 period is pi. So what we need to know is, what does secant start with? And it starts with a vertex. And there's nothing that would change this. It would change if something's being multiplied in front or added or subtracted at the end. So it's what the parent is. So we're going to start at positive 1. 1 period brings us back to positive 1. In the middle between them, it goes to the lower vertex. And then in between the vertices are asymptotes. So we practice to know the pattern. And then once you know the pattern, you just repeat it over and over and over again. So those are my asymptotes. My vertices are in there, and it oscillates up, then down, up, then down. And then the lower ones are parabolas that fold down. These are parabolas. The upper ones are little parabolas that fold up. And that's it. You graphed it. Number 2, feel free to pause, do the work, and then press play. Number 2 is cotangent. Its period would be pi, but I'm going to undo what's inside by multiplying, oops, there's multiplying, by the reciprocal. So if I do that, the new period is 3 pi over 2. Cotangent starts with an asymptote. So right at 0, we'll start with an asymptote. And then at 3 pi over 2, it will end. That's 1 period, 1 cycle. In the middle between those two, what is that, 6, so 3. That is a point of inflection. Now it would normally be in the middle between those would be 1, but the 4 makes it 4 instead. So in the middle, 1, 2, 3, 4. In the middle, 1, 2, 3, negative 4, and then you have the pattern of what we're doing. So again, to follow that pattern, in the middle, and there you go. Number 3. The period for number 3, there we go, would be 2 pi, but to undo that fraction is 3 over 4. To reduce it down, 2 goes into 4 twice, so it's 3 pi over 2 again. Cosecant starts with an asymptote, and at 3 pi over 2 is an asymptote. In the middle between them, whoa, is another asymptote. Next, so we start with 3 asymptotes. In the middle of the first 2, it would normally be 1, but 7 divided by 2, which is 3.5, that's where it's going to go. So not positive 1, but now it's been stretched up to 3.5. That's the upper vertex. And then the next 2 would be the lower vertex at 3.5, but it would be negative 3.5. And you have the other one. And that's the pattern you're going to follow. And make sure it oscillates. So you switch between upper and lower. Number 4. The period would be 2 pi. To undo 1/2 is times 2. So now it's 4 pi. So secant starts with a vertex. And when we go times 3, it's going to be an upper vertex at 3. At 4 pi would be another one, but it's off my graph. So half of 4 pi is 2 pi, and that's one's going to go down to negative 3. Now, in the middle between these two vertices is an asymptote, so that we're going to follow that pattern over here as well. And then once you have that pattern, the upper ones fold up and the lower ones fold down. Number 5. Again, feel free to press pause, try it, and then we get stuck, press play. And then when you're unstuck, press pause again and see if you can finish it. Cotangent, the period is pi, and then I'm going to go times the reciprocal to undo it. So that's 5 pi over 4. That's what the period is. So cotangent starts with an asymptote. That's something you have to memorize. And then at 5 pi over 4, it ends the cycle. So also with a asymptote. So I know every 5 pi over 4 is an asymptote. So I can't keep going here. Or can I do one more? No. So it'd be off my graph the next one. But this side I can do. So I'll do those. So there are my asymptotes on my graph. In the middle here is going to be 0. So it's in the middle of that square, in the middle. Then, in the middle there, it would go up to 2. And go down to -2. And you have your picture. Number 6, cosecant. To undo it, times 3 over 2. The 2's divide out and you have 3 pi. Cosecant starts with an asymptote. And then at 3 pi would be another one. But 3 pi is off my graph. So half of 3 pi will also be an asymptote. So that's 1.5 pi. In between those, in the middle, will be a vertex. And -2 means it's going to start at -2. In the middle, and it goes down. On the other side, following the pattern, will be the asymptote, but this one will be the upper vertex at +2. Turn the page. All right, so here's one with more transformations, including phase shift. So let's look, take our time here. So this is secant, so it would be 2 pi. Being multiplied inside with nothing, so it stays 2 pi. The phase shift, what do you see inside adding or subtracting? It's the inverse of what you see. So we're going to start at -2 pi, negative pi. There's a vertical shift. It goes down -1. So that's going to be that midline that I need to be careful about. 3 over 2 gives me the vertices. So I need to understand at 1.5, that's going to help me go either up or down from the midline to give me my vertices. So let's start. So find negative pi. There it is. What does secant start with? An upper or lower vertex. So because it's positive in front, it starts with an upper vertex. Now my midline is at -1. So it might be helpful to know for my upper vertex, what are you going to do? So for the upper vertex, you start with the midline and you add 1.5. So that gives me the answer, just 0.5. So at negative pi, I'm going to go to 0.5, and that's my upper vertex. For my lower vertex, I go -1 subtract 1.5. That's -2.5. So when I'm doing my lower vertex, that number is what I'm going to. So, but I need to first complete the cycle. So I need to know if I do the period to that. So what's negative pi plus 2 pi? So go 2 pi to the right. So negative pi plus 2 pi is positive pi. And that completes one cycle. So the distance here is 2 pi. Exactly in the middle between them, which is on the axes, I'm going to go down to negative 2.5. And now I have my pattern. In between those will be my asymptotes. and now you've completed one cycle. So just continue that. Remember, the upper ones are going to fold up, and the lower ones are going to fold down. Number 8. Cotangent. So it would be pi. Now, half to undo it, that's times 2. So that's 2 pi. The phase shift's positive pi over 4. The vertical shift is 2. And the midline would then be at 2. So 2 is going to be where my point of inflection is. So normally it would be at 0, but it went up 2. All right. Cotangent starts with a point of inflection. All right. Cotangent starts with an asymptote. So at pi over 4, it's going to be an asymptote. Now, I need to be able to go plus 2 pi and know where it ends. So where does it end? At 9 pi over 4, right here, would be the end of the cycle. So the beginning and the end. Exactly in the middle between them is going to be a point of inflection. It went up 2, so it's right here. Next, in the middle between those would have been positive 1, and it stayed that. So we're going to go in the middle between these, we're going to go up 1. In the middle here, we're going to go down 1. Nothing changed that. And then I'm going to draw my picture from that. We're going to do one more on the left. Oh, in the middle. And it's done. All right, number 9. The period would be 2 pi. Nothing would change that. The phase shift is negative pi over 2. That tells me where I'm starting. The vertical shift is 4, so it goes up. That's my midline. So if I want to know my upper vertex, it would normally be 1. It's the absolute value of that. And then I'm going to add 4. So my upper vertex is at 5. My lower vertex would have been at negative 1. But again, I'm going to add 4. So now my lower vertex is at 3. So those are my upper and lower y coordinates of my vertex. Cosecant starts with an asymptote. So at negative pi over 2, I'm going to start with an asymptote. Then I apply 2 pi. So I add 2 pi to it. And there's an asymptote. And then in the middle between them is also an asymptote. Now, between my first two asymptotes, because cosecant's negative, it starts with a lower vertex there. So here I'm going to go down to negative 3, or positive 3, I mean. And that's one that goes down. And then when I go to the next middle, it's at 5. That's going to be off my graph. It's going to be up above my graph. So let's follow that pattern. Do it one more time. And you have your graph. Kind of looks like a grumpy old man. Me. Number 10. I'm not a grumpy old man. 10. Last one. Period. Would start with 2 pi. Times 2 inside means you divide it by 2, so now the period's pi. The phase shift's negative 3 pi over 4. That's where I start. There's a vertical shift of 1. So it goes up 1. Now normally my upper vertex would be at 2, but I'm going to add 1. Normally my lower vertex would be at negative 2, but I'm going to add 1. So these are my numbers for my y-coordinate of my upper and lower vertex. Secant starts with an upper vertex in this case. So at negative 3 pi over 4, I go to an upper vertex. Then I apply the period, which is like 4 boxes to the right. and again. And then in the middle there would be my lower vertex. In between those are my asymptotes. And then once I know the pattern, it's over. I'm not going to do it all the way across, but you see the pattern. And it's over. All right, Mr. G Math, over and out. Good job doing your homework.